Good morning. So Jimmy had to take some time, which is important, to go spend with his brothers this weekend, recharge, spend time with family like you get to do, and it's a great time to spend time with them. So filling in for him today. We'll see how this goes. So I know that a couple weeks ago Jimmy talked about it was like 52 or 54 hours to read the Bible in a year, and a lot of us around have started with that. I hope many of us have. And where did we all start most of the time? In Genesis. So I figured this one here, as I was reading through it this time, more things popped out to me, but a lot of other things over the past year. Fortunately, I was lucky enough, Leah took me for my birthday last year to the Ark Encounter down in Kentucky. And that opened my eyes to a lot of the more details in this story, because the 30-second synopsis of Noah's story, we all can recite it. And it's real quick, build an ark, flood everything, put all the animals in there, get back out, everything goes on. But there's a lot more details whenever you start unpacking this story. So we'll go back. I'm going to go back and do some more details to this whole story. So we're going to go back and start in Genesis 5 to kick this off with the descendants. I'll skip ahead through a lot of the descendants of how we got from Adam to where we're at now, but then we'll pick it up here in 21 through 32. So Genesis 5, verse 21. When Enoch had lived 65 years, he fathered Methuselah. Enoch walked with God after he fathered Methuselah 300 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Enoch were 365 years. Enoch walked with God, for he was not, for God took him. When Methuselah had lived 187 years, he fathered Lamech. Methuselah lived after he fathered Lamech for 782 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died. So lots of us skip through those generational things because they're real wordy and stuff, but we're going to, DP, where's my slide at in here? Or did it not get put in? I was going to try to make this easier than me just talking it all out loud, but I don't see it. See if you can find it, but we'll keep going meanwhile on that. So all the ages is on the slide that I have once we get it, so it gets a little clearer of what ages they were. But basically, we're starting here at, so Lamech would be Noah's grandfather. So he was 187 when he fathered Noah's father. So kids, math, 187. Remember that. You got it? Isaac's smiling, Cameron's smiling, so we got that. And then Methuselah was 182 when he fathered Noah. So keep that number in mind. So whenever Noah's grandfather was, well, then Noah had his first child at 500. So his kids at the time of the flood would have all been less than 100 years old. Because the flood started at 600, Noah was 500 whenever his first son was born. So you have 3 sons, all under 100 years of age, whenever you find out, oh, you're supposed to build an ark. No real timetable of when this needs to be done, but you have 3 kids with you to build this ark that are all under 100. Your grandfather and your father are still alive. All your family members of that expands out of all your cousins. I mean, we're not talking a small family here. It says sons and daughters for both his grandfather and his father. So tons of people here around, all of them working together. So the reason I put all these numbers to all this, because if you start thinking this through, so Noah's father died 5 years before the flood. So in the process at that time, if you think current worldly things, it took 3 years to build the Titanic. That's a big ship we think about here. But that's also with modern technology, all the things you're thinking now. So Noah had 100 years from somewhere between the 500 to 100 to 600 when the flood started to build this ark. So talking a pretty massive thing here. I got dimensions later we'll talk about. If you've never been down to the Ark Encounter, largely encourage it because it shows a lot of this. So is that what we got there, Dave and DP? All right. So anyways, with all this being said, his father died 5 years. So he's in the middle of building an ark and he loses his dad. And I know several of us out there have went through those situations. We've lost other loved ones. Does that disrupt your life for a while? You lost that loved one, especially a parent like that. But he had to keep doing what God called him to do. So take it a step farther with all of this. Flood happens at Noah's 600th year. If you add the ages together that I was telling the boys, which is up there at some point when we get to the slide, it adds up to the 969 is when his grandfather died. That just happens to coincide exactly the same time the flood happened. So you're building along, working on this massive ark, this giant creation, and you're working with all these other people too. Because Noah's no way he did all this by himself. I mean, we're talking something that's 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high in modern day terms, if you switch the cubits over to roughly what we're talking, which can be 10 RVs end to end by 2 school buses wide by, Leo enjoy this, 7 giraffe necks high. So not something that's tiny. And to do all that himself, he has all these people around him. Think of all the loggers, all the regular tradesmen, workers, the masons, all the people working on all that stuff around it. You come close to all these people because you're building on this big project together. But it never talks about what happened to all these people when the flood came. So you're helping Noah build this ark one day, but then the flood comes, and if you start reading into where we were at there in what Brent read for us in Genesis 7, 1 through 5, that God finally talked to him and gave him a 7-day notice that said, hey, the flood's actually coming in 7 days. Noah knew the flood was coming, but he didn't know when until all of a sudden you're 7 days out. And I don't know about the rest of you all, but I procrastinate about a lot of stuff. So there was probably a lot of things that Noah still had left to do with 7 days notice, like, hey, we got to get all this stuff finished up right now. But at the same time, you're super busy. But what about all those people that are helping him build all this? All the other people that are working everything, all the people that are cooking the meals, doing all the food, keeping things clean around the camp. They're all still there. But who's allowed to get on that ark with Noah? His wife, his 3 sons, and their wives. 8 people. Not to mention, somewhere right in there, by the years that they give us in the Bible, his grandfather is still there helping him too. So could that have corresponded to right in that 7 days of, sorry, Grandpa, but you can't get on this ark with me type thing? But yet Noah stayed true and kept doing what he was supposed to do to build the ark, to do what God had commanded him to do. So lots of times we think of this as a big happy story, but think about all those people that were right there around trying to build this monstrosity. I mean, think of modern day big projects. You drive past the construction project, how many people are working on that on the road? How long have they been working on the turnpike here going through Somerset? Like, how long does it take to build a new building when we drive past and we see construction all over the place? Things don't just happen, and that's using modern day tools and technology. We're building an ark that you have to hoist stuff 45 feet in the air back then to get this ark up that high and keep it balanced that it doesn't tip over in the middle of you creating this giant ark. So like we were talking about, all the people that are helping, you have a lot of people around, the tailors, the guards, the weavers, the merchants. The big one for me, think about the guards. I mean, there had to be guards there because the world was corrupt at this time. So do you think everybody that's in the area around what Noah's doing is like hey, this is great, he's building an ark? Or is there a lot of people against what he's doing right now, saying that everyone's going to be destroyed? Like, there's a lot of people out there that aren't really liking what Noah's trying to tell them is going on. So you have all kinds of people around. Not to mention the huge family that he'd have at that point. I mean, with all the cousins, his wife's family, everybody. Think about those days. People don't travel super long distances. It wasn't easy. It wasn't quick to travel somewhere. So most of that family was all probably right there nearby. So all of these people were here before the flood. Now, yeah, you may have lost a person here or there throughout the building, but most of these people were still there up to the flood, people that you've grown close to, people that have become your family because you've worked on this project for the past 100 years with them. Think about the church family that he had. people that may not have worked on the project, but have been other people in the town that you hung out with or went to their houses to study and do things with. There's so many people with you in just this project that you've grown so close to. You get 7 days notice, and can we jump to the next slide, Dave, or DP? No? Okay. Well, if we look at this slide here, all you have after this is a very small section of it. Noah, his wife. We go from this whole, all these people, to 8 people left. But yet, at this point, now the flood's here. You're on an ark. From estimates, they're guessing somewhere around 8,000 animals or 7,000 animals. So take 7,000 animals divided by 8 people. Anybody real quick at math? 875 per person to take care of. So anybody who's ever dealt with anything in agriculture or dealing with animals, how long does it take? How many people are normally per animal, even in like commercial operations nowadays? 875 is a little bit of a stretch even with modern skills to get everything done. So on top of taking care of 875 animals per person, which I'm sure if you go to the Ark Encounter, they show a lot of the stuff of how they would have made it easier to self-draining, cleaning, watering, all that stuff, but those things still break. Things need fixed. You still have to get feed to all of them. You still got to make sure there's water there. Not to mention you still have to feed yourselves, keep some sort of cleanliness on this boat because 40 days, everything trapped in there. It's not exactly a pleasant smell or situation to put yourself in. So lots of times we look at things and we're like, oh, we're real busy. Do you think we're really actually busy? Or do you think Noah and his family were busy? Because this was like a 40-day sprint the whole time trying to keep all this stuff done to take care of all the animals that God's tasked you with, all the work that you just have to do. Meanwhile, at the same time, do you think he ever had time to mourn the loss of all the people they just closed the door on? Including his grandfather, possibly, right there at the ages line up. So all of a sudden, you're just work, knocking all this stuff out. So, all right, where am I at now? So 40 days of the rain, 150 days of flooding till the earth actually was clear enough for the dove to bring back the olive branch. So, yeah, we think of the 40 days of the actual rainfall, but it wasn't just 40 days. They say 150 days after that till it truly dried up. So 40 days is one thing, but now you're talking almost 3.5 times that again to sit there and wait for everything to subside. So we say, oh, a 40-day sprint to take care of all these things, but oh, really, now it's going to be 150 till it dries out. Because if I remember correctly, when I was reading all this, God had told him before that it was going to bring the flood for 40 days. He never really told him till at the point that he was flooding that, oh, you're going to have to wait for a long time afterwards till it all dries out. So you get all this stuff ready, you're getting there, but God prepared them. They had everything they need, but it still was a lot of work. So lots of times we all think that we're overwhelmed, we're doing too much. Think back to Noah. First of all, you were handed a project, which I'm sure he had some of the skills to build a boat or an ark, whatever you want to call it. But do you think he had all the skills for everything involved in that? Or do you think it was one of those that, hey, here's the blueprints, and Noah was like, oh my, how am I supposed to do this? It's one of those, oh, I'm overwhelmed. Oh, this is a lot to take in. Do any of us ever feel overwhelmed by something we get tasked with? Something we get to, an event we have to go through in our lives that we get overwhelmed by? I think we all can relate and be overwhelmed at some point. But also remember that God's involved in everything. He's only going to give us what we can handle. He knew Noah could handle this task. As big as it might seem, as complex as it was, as much work as needed done during the flood, he knew that Noah, his wife, 3 sons, and their wives could handle the workload that was going to be given to them. Were they probably wore out afterwards? I would hope so. But he knew they could handle it. He knew they had the strength to get through that struggle and make it to that point. So then the flood ends. The dove comes back with the olive branch. Okay, things are springing forth. You're tired. They've just dealt with all these animals, fixing all this stuff. Let's jump to Genesis 8, verses 20 and 21. Soon as everything gets off the boat, gets off the ark. Verse 20. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord and took some of every clean animal and some of every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And when the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, the Lord said in his heart, I will never curse this ground again because of man, for the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I ever again strike down every living creature as I have done. So it's one of those, all right, the flood's gone. I'm tired. I'm ready to go take a nap, relax. But what did Noah go and do first? Build an altar, more work. Go sacrifice some animals, all to serve the Lord and please him for what he had allowed them to survive through, to praise God. Thank you for what you just did for us, to cleanse the earth of all the evil that was going on. He's still thankful even after 190 days of furious work on top of somewhere around 100 years beforehand of building this ark. Noah hasn't really had a break at all, but he still remembers to praise God and thank him by building an altar after all this. So no matter how bad the struggle, what you're going through doesn't make sense, we still have to thank God for what he's putting us through, even if it doesn't necessarily make sense to us at that moment, because of what it could help us with in the future. So then we go to the whole section about the rainbow, but I'm not going to go down there today and down that discussion. But sometime after the rainbow and everything, Noah did build a vineyard as his life after. So that's in Genesis 9, 20 and 23. So starting in verse 20 in Genesis 9, Noah began to be a man of the soil, and he planted a vineyard. He drank of the wine and became drunk and laid uncovered in his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brothers outside. Then Shem and Japheth took a garment, laid it on both their shoulders, and walked backwards and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned backwards, and they did not see their father's nakedness. So Noah was working, dealing with all this. Did he ever take that moment to mourn for all of his workers and helpers that he lost? Did he ever take a moment to mourn the loss of his grandfather? He finally got done, built the altar, he creates a vineyard, and then he got drunk and falls on the ground. So Noah did all these great things, but he still slipped up and fell down naked, drunk. Never really dealt with what he had to deal with in the mourning of all the people he lost. You can push it all away for as long as you want, but at some point you have to deal with that loss and mourn through it and work through that. But God knew that this was coming. He put his sons there, and he knew that his sons are what he needed at that moment, and they cover him to protect him from everyone else seeing him laying there naked and drunk. God knows what you need and who you need around you. They're there. He puts us in places and puts us through struggles for a reason. Like I said last week, we don't always see that and understand it in the moment, but at some point it'll become clear to us, or it's at least clear to those around us, of why we've been placed in their lives and what we're there to do. So God lays out paths and tasks for all of us. He knows what we can accomplish. He knows there will be bumps and struggles. Some of us will lose focus early on, and others later on. But God welcomes us all back and puts the people around us that lets us know and knows who we will need for just such a time. We often talk here recently about how bad off the world is and how rough everything is. But I still don't think it's as bad off as in Noah's time. where it goes to the point where God was going to flood and blot out everyone. So no matter how bad we might think things are right now, we do know there are people around us that have struggles and have lost that focus and need the help of a Shem, a Ham, or a Japheth. Those are Noah's sons, by the way. To go out and help someone that's around us. Be the Shem, the Ham, the Japheths that were there when Noah needed them to help clothe them. After all the great things he'd done throughout his life and this whole story, we often skip over what happened afterwards and that Noah needed those that were around him. So what I have for you all this week is we know there's people out there struggling around us. We have struggles here with people within our congregation that are going through things. We all do at different times in our lives. We're all at different points. But we're all here together as this church family to help each other through those times and to help others outside this church. So go out this week, be the helping person in someone's life around you. Be the helping person that helps those within the congregation. We have the time, we have the will. God's put us in this place for this time to do what we're called to do. If any of you have prayer needs or have not taken Christ on in baptism, some of us will be up here to pray with you and help you through that to